I was 68 that November, owner of a bar called the Lantern Room, a narrow place beside the river, where old songs lingered in the bloom. The regulars had all gone home, the stool stood empty by the rail. A single lamp above the counter poured amber light across the ale. Outside the rain worked on the pavement, slow and steady through the night, while I counted out the register beneath that tired yellow light. I'd finally sold the building after 30 years behind the wood. Tomorrow strangers would take possession and change it all for good. While moving boxes from the cellar, I noticed one loose floorboard there, the kind of thing you'd walk across 1,000 times without a care. Beneath it lay a sealed envelope, wrapped in cloth gone brown with age. No name written on the front, no date to place it on a page. I carried it upstairs carefully, set it on the polished bar, beside an untouched glass of whiskey and an old cigar. The handwriting looked familiar, though decades blurred my mind like a melody from another lifetime. You almost find the letter addressed to nobody, waiting beneath the years, hidden underneath laughter and oceans of spilled tears. Some stories choose their moment, some truths arrive too late, yet still they find the doorway standing open in the rain. The letter came from my mother, written back in '74, just weeks before she passed away, and walked beyond that door. She never spoke much of my father, the man who disappeared one spring, leaving only unanswered questions and the hurt that silence brings. Inside she told a different story, one she carried all along. He hadn't left because he wanted, he'd been sick and hiding it from everyone. She wrote that pride was his companion and fear his final friend. He chose distance over pity until he reached his end. The rain grew heavier outside as midnight settled on the town. I sat alone behind the counter, reading every line slowly down. No anger rose to meet me, no grand forgiveness came, just a strange and quiet softness where old bitterness had remained. I looked around the scratches in the bar, at photographs of long gone patrons, and all the roads we traveled far. The years hadn't answered everything, but somehow that was fine. Some mysteries don't need solving to loosen their hold on time. A letter addressed to nobody, waiting beneath the years, hidden underneath laughter and oceans of spilled tears. Some stories choose their moment, some truths arrive too late, yet still they find the doorway standing open in the rain. Near closing, the storm began to fade, the river dark beyond the glass, street lights shimmered on the water as another chapter passed. I folded up the weathered pages and slipped them in my coat. Certain words can cross a lifetime without ever missing both. The regulars had all gone home, the stool stood empty by the rail, a single lamp above the counter poured amber light across the air. Outside the rain worked on the pavement, slow and steady through the night, while I counted out the register beneath that tired yellow light. I'd finally sold the building after 30 years behind. The first light hadn't reached the mountains when I unlocked the diner door. I've been doing the same routine for almost 20 years. Turn on the coffee machine, stack the cups, wipe the counter, watch the empty highway, wake up. My place sat along an old state road, the kind travelers barely use anymore. Most mornings belong to truckers, farmers and men carrying quiet troubles. I was 64 that spring, a veteran with a bad knee, a small business and too many memories, especially one. My younger brother Tommy, gone 33 years, not dead, just gone. One argument, one slammed door, then silence. Back in 1991, we fought over our father's farm. Nothing unusual, families do that, but pride is a stubborn disease. Harsh words turned into harder feelings. Weeks became years, years became decades. Neither of us called, neither apologized. Our parents passed away, life kept moving, the distance remained. Sometimes I convinced myself it no longer mattered. Then I'd see brothers fishing together, laughing at some roadside gas station, and the old wound would open again. That April morning felt ordinary until the bell above the door rang. stepped inside wearing worn leather gloves and a faded denim jacket. His beard was gray, his shoulders heavier, but I knew him instantly. Tommy. Coffee for my brother. After all these years apart, some roads don't lead to places, they lead back to the heart. Coffee for my brother. As the morning sky turned gold, time can build high fences, but it can't make blood grow old. For a moment neither of us moved. The diner felt strangely quiet. Even the refrigerator hum seemed to disappear. Then Tommy pulled out a chair, sat down, and smiled nervously. "Still make terrible coffee?" he asked. Exactly the kind of joke he would have made 40 years earlier. I laughed before I could stop myself. The sound surprised both of us. I poured 2 cups, set one in front of him. Steam curled toward the ceiling. Neither of us knew where to begin. So we started small, weather, roads, health problems, the safe subjects. But grief has a way of entering any room eventually. Tommy finally looked out the window. "Wish I'd called Dad," he said. The words landed softly. He didn't cry, neither did I. Men from our generation rarely do, but something shifted. The wall we'd spent decades building began coming apart brick by brick. He told me about Arizona, about construction jobs, about 2 daughters I'd never met. I told him about my diner, about Mom's old recipes, about the years I spent pretending I wasn't angry anymore. Outside, dawn spread slowly across the fields. The highway brightened, customers began arriving, but neither of us noticed. We were busy recovering lost time, one conversation at a time, one memory at a time, one cup at a time. Coffee for my brother. After all these years apart, some roads don't lead to places, they lead back to the heart. Coffee for my brother. As the morning sky turned gold, time can build high fences, but it can't make blood grow old. When you're young, you think reconciliation can wait. You assume tomorrow is guaranteed, that there will always be another holiday, another phone call, another chance. Age teaches otherwise. You start counting empty chairs, missed birthdays, voices you'll never hear again, and suddenly forgiveness becomes more valuable than being right, more valuable than pride, more valuable than winning. Some lessons arrive late, but late is still better than never. Coffee for my brother. As the sunlight filled the room, the years between us faded like shadows leaving gloom. Coffee for my brother, and for everything we lost, for the stubbornness and silence, for the distance and the cost. again together at the edge of memory. Tommy left around noon. We hugged awkwardly in the parking lot. Promised to stay. Winter I turned 72. Snow settled heavy across the county roads. I had spent most of my life at sea, chasing horizons that never stayed still. Cargo ships, fishing boats, storms in distant waters. Now my days move slower. A small rented house, coffee before sunrise, long walks through town. Every Sunday morning I pass the old St. Mercy Church. Nobody attended anymore. The bell tower leaned slightly west. The stained glass was cracked and weeds climbed the stone walls like time reclaiming forgotten ground. One gray morning after fresh snowfall, I noticed something sitting on the chapel steps. A weathered leather suitcase, half covered in snow, waiting. I stood there a long while, watching my breath drift through the cold. No tracks led away from it, no car nearby, no sign of who left it there. Curiosity eventually won. I carried it inside the church, where pale winter light filtered through broken glass. Dust floated through the silence. The air smelled of old wood and forgotten prayers. The brass latches opened easily. Inside I found no money, no valuables, only photographs, dozens of them, carefully arranged in bundles. Families, birthdays, picnics, Christmas mornings, entire lives captured on fading paper. Beneath them rested a small notebook and a single key, nothing else. Dust on the chapel steps, snow falling soft and slow. Somebody carried a lifetime there and never let me know. Dust on the chapel steps, beneath the winter sky. Certain stories arrive unannounced, just to ask us why. The notebook belonged to a man named Walter, a school teacher, widower, father of one daughter. The entries stretched across 40 years. Not dramatic, not tragic, just ordinary pieces of living. Notes about garden tomatoes, his daughter's piano recitals, the way sunlight reached the kitchen table every October pages changed, names disappeared, friends passed away. His daughter moved west, the handwriting grew shakier, the spaces between entries became longer, until one final page, just 6 words: I don't want these forgotten. That sentence stayed with me. The snow outside kept falling, the church remained silent, and somehow I understood exactly what he meant. The key led me to a storage locker on the edge of town. Inside stood shelves packed neatly, with boxes labeled by year. Letters, home movies, school drawings, recipes, birthday cards, small treasures nobody else would recognize. A complete archive of one family's existence. I spent weeks tracking down his daughter. She arrived in early spring, a woman in her 60s, with tired eyes and gentle manners. We opened the boxes together. Sometimes she laughed, sometimes she'd cry, mostly she listened. Each object seemed to return, a forgotten room of memory. At sunset she held her father's notebook and stared through the storage window. He was always afraid people vanish twice, she said. Once when they die, again when nobody remembers. Dust on the chapel steps, snow falling soft and slow. Somebody carried a lifetime there and never let me know. Dust on the chapel steps, beneath the winter sky. Certain stories arrive unannounced, just to ask us why. The sea taught me many things: how storms arrive, how ships disappear, how distance changes people.
I was 73 that spring, a former trumpet player living alone outside a small Mississippi town. The band was long gone, the clubs were gone too. Most of my days passed quietly on a porch overlooking empty fields, watching clouds drift over places that used to feel important. One afternoon, a cream-colored envelope arrived. No return address, just my name. Inside was a single invitation: Magnolia Hall, Saturday night. One final dance. The barroom had been closed for years. I hadn't set foot inside since 1982. Back when music filled every corner and still believed summer nights would last forever. The road there wound through low fog and old oak trees. By the time I arrived, the moon was hanging above the roofline. Magnolia Hall looked tired, beautiful but tired, paint peeling from the columns, windows clouded with age. Inside, however, the chandelier still glowed. A handful of familiar faces stood scattered across the room. Gray hair, wrinkled hands, old friends disguised by time. At the far end of the floor, a record player turned slowly, an old vinyl album, the same one we danced to on countless Saturday nights. For a moment, it felt like the years had folded inward. One more turn across the floor, one more song beneath the light, holding on to echoes before they disappear into the night. The music grows softer, the room grows small and still, but somewhere inside the melody, the young versions of us remain until the final note fades away. People laugh, shared stories, remembered names. The barroom filled with ghosts of ordinary moments. A first kiss near the staircase, a broken heart by the cold rack, a proposal beside the bandstand. Then I saw her, Clara Monroe, the woman I loved when Eisenhower was still president, the woman who left for Chicago before either of us found the courage to say what mattered. She stood near the window, silver hair catching moonlight odor. Of course, so was I. But her smile arrived exactly the way I remembered, like no time had passed at all. When the next record began, no grand reunion, no dramatic confession, just two people sharing a quiet moment. Life had delayed for half a century. Outside, mist drifted across the parking lot. Inside, the music floated through the hall, like a memory refusing to leave. We talked about children, careers, losses, victories, the roads we'd taken, the roads we hadn't. Neither of us spoke about regret. Not directly, some things don't need names. When the final song ended, she squeezed my hand and smiled toward the empty bandstand. Funny how fast it all goes. I couldn't argue. One more turn across the floor, one more song beneath the light, holding on to echoes before they disappear into the night. The music grows softer, the room grows small and still, but somewhere inside the melody,
shocked everyone. Magnolia Hall would be demolished the following month. A highway expansion, progress they called it. People gathered their coats. The lights dimmed one by one. The old dancers disappeared through the front doors, leaving only silence and the scent of polished wood. I stood there a while longer, listening, as if the room itself was saying goodbye. One more turn across the floor, beneath the fading chandelier glow, where decades of laughter linger long after the people go. I was 61 that summer, driving freight through Arkansas nights. A long haul man with silver stubble, following tail lights and faded signs. The interstate stretched forever, black as coal beneath the moon. My radio barely whispered an old blues tune. Around midnight I pulled over at a roadside motel worn by years. The neon vacancy sign flickered like it was fighting its last fear. The clerk handed me a brass key, room 7 painted on the tag. I grabbed my coat and travel bag and headed through the dark. The room smelled faintly of old wallpaper and rain trapped inside the walls. A ceiling fan turned slowly overhead, casting shadows long and small. Near the bed sat a suitcase, brown leather cracked with age. No name attached, no claim ticket, just silence guarding it like a cage. I figured management hadn't missed it, forgotten after someone checked out. But curiosity has a quiet voice that's hard to shut out. So I carried it to a wooden table while thunder rolled outside, and opened up the rusted clasps with caution and time. The key left on the counter, the suitcase nobody claimed. Some stories spend decades waiting for someone to say their name. The road keeps moving forward, the miles erase the tracks, yet pieces of forgotten lives still find their way back. Inside were postcards from New Mexico, a pocket compass stained by use, a pair of leather driving gloves, and photographs worn loose. One picture showed a young woman standing beside a desert stream, laughing toward the camera like she had never doubted dreams.
Beneath the photos lay a journal, its pages yellow, edges thin, written by a traveling salesman back in 1970. He wrote about chasing horizons, town to town across the states, and a woman he planned to marry before arriving too late. A final entry stopped me cold, written at this very place. He'd learned she passed unexpectedly, just weeks before their wedding date. The suitcase never moved beyond that room. The journey ended there. A life paused between one heartbeat and a sorrow too heavy to bear. Outside the storm began fading, the clouds broke apart overhead, and somehow I understood why the old traveler never left. At dawn I carried the suitcase down to the front desk below, not to solve the story completely, just to let somebody know. The key left on the counter, the suitcase nobody claimed. Some stories spend decades waiting for someone to say their name. The road keeps moving forward, the miles erase the tracks, yet pieces of forgotten lives still find their way back. The eastern sky grew amber beyond the trucks and wires. Morning settled on the highway and the remains of old desires. Some grief becomes a monument, hidden where strangers pass, quiet as dust in motel rooms, and memories behind glass. The key left on the counter, still shining in my mind, a reminder that unfinished roads are not always left behind. The journey wasn't mine to carry, but for one night I understood how love can stay inside a place long after it should. Now every time I pass that exit, beneath the waking sky, I think about room 7 and the lives that never truly say goodbye. Where the candles burned alone, I was 68 that autumn, a retired sheriff with more years behind me than ahead. The town of Blackwater had grown quiet, the kind of quiet that settles deep into old wood and never really leaves. The church stood at the edge of a cotton field, white paint peeling from the walls, its bells silent for nearly 20 years.
One evening I drove there alone. No reason I could explain, just a feeling. The sky was turning copper beyond the trees, and a thin fog drifted low across the ground. The building looked smaller than I remembered, older, like it had spent decades waiting for someone. I pushed open the heavy door. Dust floated through the fading light. The pews were empty. The piano sat untouched beneath a sheet. I walked slowly down the center aisle, hearing every step echo through the room. Then I noticed something on the altar, a photograph, black and white, edges worn thin. There were 6 young men standing beside this very church. One of them was me. The others were boys I'd once called brothers, friends from another lifetime. 5 of them were gone now, some buried, some simply vanished into the miles. I hadn't seen that picture in 50 years. Where the candles burned alone, where the shadows learned my name, I found a piece of yesterday, still glowing through the rain. Time can take the roads we traveled, time can steal the songs we knew, but somewhere in an empty church, the past keeps waiting for you. I sat in the front pew for hours. Outside, darkness settled over the fields. The moon rose beyond the stained glass, painting silver shapes across the floor. I remembered summer nights, cheap whiskey shared behind the church, promises we believed would last forever. Back then we were certain life would stay wide open. None of us imagined funerals or divorces or lonely houses after midnight. The years arrive quietly, then suddenly they're gone, like smoke leaving an open window. Near midnight I found a small notebook hidden beneath the piano bench. Inside were names, dates, memories. Someone had written down stories from church gatherings, long forgotten weddings, harvest suppers, Christmas choirs, baptisms by the river. The final page held a single sentence: nothing truly disappears while someone remembers. I read it 3 times. The church felt warmer somehow, not haunted, not sad, just full of lives that had once filled those pews, laughed beneath those rafters, and believed their moments mattered. Maybe they still did. Where the candles burned alone, where the shadows learned my name, I found a piece of yesterday, still glowing through the rain. Time can take the roads we travel, time can steal the songs we knew, but somewhere in an empty church, the past keeps waiting for you. The fog thickened outside, a distant now called from the trees. lit one candle near the altar, then another, for old friends, for lost years, for the young man smiling inside that photograph. The flame trembled softly, like memory itself, fragile, stubborn, refusing to disappear. Where the candles burned alone, where forgotten voices stay, I watch the darkness step aside and let the memories play. The world keeps moving forward, the seasons drift on through, but somewhere in an empty church, the past still shines anew. Where the candles burn alone beneath the midnight sky, I learned that what we carry in our hearts never truly says goodbye. Before dawn, I locked the door behind me. The fog was lifting, the first pale light touched the fields. I stood there for a moment, listening to the silence. Then I drove away. The church disappeared in my rearview mirror, but sometimes I wonder if it still stands there, holding old laughter, old prayers, old stories. I was 72 that spring, a retired railroad engineer, living along beside the tracks that once carried my whole life. The station had been closed for years, boarded windows, cracked brick walls, weeds growing through the platform. Most folks barely remembered there had ever been trains here, but I remembered everything. The schedules, the conductors, the faces waving goodbye, the long steel songs rolling through the valley at night. One evening thick fog settled over town, the kind that swallowed streetlights whole. I sat beside my fireplace listening to the wind when I heard it. The train whistled low, distant, impossible. No trains had used those rails for nearly 15 years. The sound returned the next night, then again 3 nights later. Always after midnight, always hidden somewhere inside the fog. Curiosity finally got the better of me. I pulled on my old coat, grabbed a lantern, and walked toward the abandoned station. The fog drifted between empty buildings. The platform emerged slowly from the darkness. The wooden benches still stood there. A rusted clock hung frozen at 11:17. The tracks vanished into white mist.
I noticed something on a wooden table inside the waiting room. A photograph, its edges curled with age. 3 young railroad men. One of them was me. There's a whistle beyond the fog, calling through the years, through old departures, through forgotten hopes and fears. Some journeys never finish, some tracks never truly end. They keep on running softly around every distant bend. I stared at that photograph beneath the lantern glow. The other 2 men were Arthur and Dean, my closest friends, my railroad brothers. Arthur had passed away decades ago. Dean disappeared one autumn without saying goodbye. Nobody ever knew why. The photograph hadn't been there before. I was certain of it, turning it over. I found handwriting on the back, Dean's handwriting, a single sentence: meet me here one last time. My heart nearly stopped. The date written beneath it was tomorrow. Tomorrow's date, 40 years old, 40 years waiting. The following night, I returned before midnight. Fog covered everything. The station felt suspended outside time. I waited alone. The old clock remained frozen. The tracks remained silent. Then somewhere in the distance, a whistle echoed again. Long, melancholy, beautiful. For a moment, I could almost see the past. Passengers carrying suitcases, porters shouting schedules, steam drifting beneath moonlight. And there was Dean, not truly there, only memory, standing beside a train car, laughing the way he used to, young forever, untouched by time. There's a whistle beyond the fog, where the lost years gently stay, where old companions travel on rails that never fade away. The stations may grow empty, the timetables may disappear, but the people who shaped our lives remain remarkably near. There's a whistle beyond the fog, beneath the breaking dawn. And somehow every mile we share keeps carrying on. The station still stands today. The clock still reads 11:17. The rails still disappear into distant countryside. Sometimes fog rolls in from the river after